Let me talk about singing Hannah's gospel. Singing Hannah's gospel. You know, people are moved to sing by experiences that affect them at their deepest levels. Whether the experiences are profoundly pleasant and joyful or unpleasant and painful, across the ages, humans have been expressing our feelings about what we've gone through by songs. We sing a couple of the Negro spirituals this morning. There is a balm in Gilead. The blues, which is a takeoff from the spirituals. Country and western ballads. Classical music. Folk songs. Rhythm and blues. Peace songs. Hymns. Anthems. Gospel, hip-hop, all share that common feature of coming out of the deep wells of experiences that people have gone through and that have moved them to not just tell their story, but to put it in melody. Sometimes it rhymes and sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes the beat is fast tempo and sometimes it's slow. But always a song is an expression of what has come out of our experience. And so it is with Hannah's song that we see in the second chapter of 1 Samuel. Hannah's song is a national psalm. Psalm simply means song or hymn of Israel that was inspired by the experience of that woman who was the mother of Samuel, the prophet who anointed Saul and David, the first two kings of Israel. Samuel's father, Elkanah, had two wives, Hannah and Peninnah. Hannah was unable to bear children, which may have been why Elkanah married Peninnah. You understand that although Elkanah loved Hannah, a man was held in highest respect by being the father of children. Women who could not produce children were considered unfavored by God, and it was a ground to be put off. But Hannah did not get put off by Elkanah. Elkanah loved Hannah so much that though she could not have children, he said, I got to have you. I'm going to keep you. You're not leaving. I'm not putting you out. And so he kept her. And so still Hannah endured the public pain and the private frustration of her infertility. She was helpless as Elkanah took a second wife. And when Peninnah began having children, Hannah's pain increased. You can imagine how much she wanted to be a mother now, because her husband's other wife had children. She wanted to be able to give him what the other wife had done. So her pain increased. And then when Peninnah began taunting her, you know how it is, taunting her because of her infertility, the frustration and the pain just increased all the more. It is one thing to be without. It is another pain to be without and have somebody else have what you want. But then to have that somebody use what they have as a sign of one-upsmanship over you is a special pain indeed. Hannah was a praying woman, and from the depth of her pain, she prayed for deliverance from infertility. In her piety, she vowed that if God would grant her a male child, she would raise him to live a consecrated life from birth to death. You need to understand that this Nazirite vow that we read about wasn't usually one that lasted for life. It usually lasted for a period of time, and one could then go off the vow. It's sort of like a fast. But Hannah prayed and said, Lord, if you'll give me a male child, I won't have him be a Nazirite for just a few years or a few seasons. I will raise him to be yours for life. Her prayer was answered. Hannah became pregnant. She gave birth to a son who she named Samuel. And after the boy was weaned from breast milk, when he was no longer dependent on her, she kept her vow and presented the boy to serve God for the rest of his life. Now let me put a footnote on that, and let me remind you that most times mothers have an anguish about getting the children off somebody else. Every mother knows how she felt the first day she dropped her baby off of school. Although she planned to pick the baby up at the end of school day, she knows that lump in her throat and that tear in her eye that came from dropping off that baby into somebody else. Imagine a woman leaving her firstborn child for life. But when you read this text, you don't read about a woman who is crying the blues. You read a woman who is singing the gospel. From the opening words, Hannah's song is a poetic expression of thanksgiving for divine obedience. My heart exults in the Lord. My strength is exalted in my God. My mouth derides my enemies because I rejoice in my victory. This is gospel singing about being delivered from a painful situation. This is good news about what God has done, which is why I titled this sermon, Singing Hannah's Gospel. Hannah is singing her good news. And we ought to sing God's gospel, our good news, because God changes situations as only God can. Look what Hannah says about it. There is no holy one like the Lord. No one besides you. There is no rock like our God. That's at verse 2. The song proceeds to describe how God operates. The Lord is a God of knowledge, and by him actions are weighed. The bows of the mighty are broken. Bows are weapons of offense. And Hannah sings that the mighty have their offensive weapon broken, yet the feeble gird on strength. Hannah identified with the feeble. Those who were full have hired themselves out for bread, but those who were hungry are fat with spoil. The barren has borne 7, but she who has many children is forlorn. The Lord kills and brings to life. He brings down to Sheol, the underworld, and raises up. The Lord makes poor and makes rich. He brings low. He also exalts. He raises up the poor from the dust. He lifts the needy from the ash heap to make them sit with princes and inherit a seat of power. He will guard the feet of his faithful ones, but the wicked shall be cut off in darkness, for not by might does one prevail. Gospel singing. You understand that people who have known the sting of injustice can sing Hannah's gospel. If you've ever been down and forced to stand aside while others advance, you recognize the arrogance that comes from privilege. People who've been mistreated on account of their situations or their backgrounds know what it's like to be delivered from second-class citizenship. The gospel of Jesus Christ is built on the experiences of people like Hannah. This is because the Hebrew Christian Bible really is about how God brings people out from and through oppressive situations. The story of Adam and Eve tells us how God works with displaced people. You can't get displaced further than Adam and Eve got displaced. The story of Abraham and Sarah tells us how, like that of Hannah, tells how God delivered frustrated people. Abraham and Sarah were frustrated from childlessness for years, decades. And yet and still, their story is about being brought out and brought through. Jacob's story teaches us about how God transforms people who have blown their past opportunities. Jacob had a wonderful life with his daddy and blew it by cheating his daddy. Cheating his blind daddy. Cheating his daddy and working with his mama. He was slick, but as my mother-in-law often would say, he could stand another greasing because he wound up getting busted. blew it. But Jacob's story shows how God can take us out of our blown situations. Joseph's story teaches us how God operates even when we've been rejected by those who are closest to us. His own brothers turned him out. His own brothers turned their backs on him. His own brothers left him and told his daddy that he was dead, and left his father to grieve for years, and left Joseph lost. We sing God's gospel. We sing Hannah's gospel because God brings us out like only God can. God lifts us up like only God can. God opens doors that only God can. The gospel of Jesus Christ is built on experiences of people like Hannah. And if you have not had a Hannah-like experience in your life, keep living. You will not always be up. You will not always be successful. You will not always be on top of it. You will not always do it right. You will need to be brought out. And Hannah's gospel is a word of encouragement for those of us who know what it feels like to have been down and out and then be brought through. But the second thing we learn from Hannah's gospel is that we got to share the testimony. We have to share the testimony. Hannah's song is another installment in the long gospel narrative about people's being delivered by God's power to produce justice to people who suffer moral or social or cultural or political or other oppression. You see, testimony is important because other people need to know that we've been delivered. Now, I know we like to keep our junk in our trunk.